welcome. It is Monday night, and for this week and next week anyway, we are the IDP Heat Seekers, brought to you by rotoheat.com. I am not Brad. Brad may or may not be with us momentarily. If you see a curtain moving down there, no, it's not a ghost. That's a different show of mine. That's just my cat messing around. But Austin, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Do we think Brad's on vacation?
It very well could be. Hopefully everything is all right and he fell asleep getting his kid to bed or had extra homework, playing teacher. Could be any number of different, and that's not a
Oh!
No, there it is.
Hopefully he didn't hear us speculating on his where he was. Although
I was in Vegas just performing my past life. How are you, gentlemen?
No, we're doing all right. We just introduced that I'm not Brad and that there isn't a ghost on this show, despite my curtains moving on their own seemingly. So just getting things started. So
wrong Roto Heat show for that one, gentlemen.
That's right.
Yeah, sorry about that. No, we're having some technical difficulties here at the house with some power, but no big deal. We're here.
All right.
And how are you guys doing tonight? How is Austin?
Well, yeah, Kraig just asked. Well, I'm doing well. You're here. I'm here. We're all here. So Monday night, let's get this thing rolling. I'm ready. This is going to be a good show.
It is going to be a good show because we get to talk about preseason football, which we've been missing, and we're glad it's here. But it'll be fun tonight because we're going to talk about rookies, which we enjoy talking about all off season, and we get to do it again for a little bit. Yep. So. Did you guys talk about Kayvon Thibodeau already yet?
We have not gone into the news and notes yet.
All right. So what's going on with Thibodeau and those New York Giants? There seems to be something in the water up there.
Yeah, they're turning into the, I guess it was the Ravens and even the Steelers of last year in terms of just injuries striking them. I think there was an offensive lineman that's out for the year. Darian Beavers was a rookie, probably inside linebacker for them, looking for a backup spot. He's out for the year. And Kayvon Thibodeau, high edge rusher pick of theirs. Thankfully, not going to be out for the year, but it kind of sounds like somewhere in that 2 to 5 weeks range, depending on how quickly his rehab goes. So certainly into the regular season potential, for that PUP list, which I believe is now 4 weeks long. So it'll put a damper on him certainly for this year. He's going to be behind a little bit more, but we'll just have to see what it does for the defense overall because him and Ojulari were looking like a nice pair of edge rushers for him. Also, I know you're still a big Aziz guy, right?
Yeah, I really like Aziz a lot this year. I think Aziz will be just fine, but this is definitely disappointing to see, a player go down with that kind of injury on that kind of play. There's been a lot of talk about trying to get the cut blocks out of the game. Do I think it was a dirty hit? Not necessarily. What I think it was just a young guy who's trying to make the roster, trying to make the play. He goes low. And Kayvon Thibodeau, he's a big guy, right? So he just doesn't want to body the guy up. He goes low. I don't think it was any malicious intent, but it's definitely discouraging. And it's one of those deals that you've got to know. I mean, they talk about it in the offseason. They talk about it at these joint practices. Coaches, regardless, coaches don't want players on the other team getting injured. We saw what was the guy from, was it Carolina that's potentially going to get cut? Yeah, Matt Rule, the guy that I can't remember who he laid a hit on.
Head coach?
No. Matt Rule has a safety on the team, and I can't remember the guy's name right now. Maybe you can find it while I'm talking about it. But basically, he laid a really tough hit this week on a receiver, and he gave him a concussion. I want to say it.
No, that's a different year. That was last year.
So he laid it. Yeah. Yes. So he laid a hit on a guy and gave him a concussion in a joint practice, and it wasn't even like a game. And he was, he caused at least 2 fights. I think it was the Patriots that's who it was.
Yeah,
the Patriots
and Wilkerson.
The Panthers and Patriots were fighting all week. So, anyways, long story short, it was basically just like Matt Rule came out and said, like, anything's on the table for this guy. Like, we don't care how good you play. Like, if you can't do the right things at the right times, like, we need you to. Like, we're not out here trying to get players injured. That's just a stupid play, a boneheaded play. I don't necessarily think the play against Thibodeau was a boneheaded play. I don't care for the block. I wish that he would have just gone high and just taken a licking, but it is what it is. And hopefully Thibodeau can get back as soon as possible.
Yeah, they're rookies. If they miss a few games in the first part of the season and they're in their rookie season, I don't see it as a huge deal. This team is kind of in a transition anyway, so it's no big deal. It'll be okay. It stinks for the progression and development of some young guys, but it'll be all right. They'll come back and they'll get up to speed as soon as possible, and we'll see him midseason, maybe a little bit later. Do we have any other news and notes, anything of importance? I know there is some football going on this evening, but anything else that we need to talk about?
No big news really. Otherwise, I mean, Roquan Smith is going to play. Still don't know how long Shaq Leonard's going to be out for. Those are sort of the two big name things, if anything.
Yeah. I have not heard either, but it did sound like Leonard was going to miss a fair amount of time, at least from what some of the sports people down this way are talking. We're probably missing multiple games. I would think you see Roquan back much quicker, seeing as he's healthy. Just got to get up to speed for the most part, at least from what I understand.
He'll be starting week 1.
Yeah, which is good for those people that were looking for fantasy production out of him, because I know that I had a few people ask me what to do if he doesn't play, and I was like, no, just breathe. There's preseasons, you got a few weeks to get that all figured out. So, and it'll be good, and it'll be good for him, because it was going to be hard for a team to pull off kind of any big trade. I know that I did see a few trades going on today, little things, backup players, guys that were going to get cut anyway, got moved, like the Nick Mullenses of the world on the offensive side, but nothing crazy. So, All right. So with that being said, we're just going to jump right into it. We're talking, we're revisiting the rookie class, and we're really talking about probably 15-ish specific players. I know when prepping for the show, I picked some guys. I tried to look at guys that I was more high on, good or bad, what they've done so far in the preseason. So I think this will be a fun conversation to kind of look back. So we're a couple weeks in now for the most part. I know the Falcons are still, their game isn't over yet, but most of the way through 2 weeks of preseason. So let's look back and kind of talk about what we're seeing, what we aren't seeing, maybe some things that we're thinking about as we've gone through. Because, the preseason hype train is in full effect. And I will say, don't jump to conclusions. I know there are, especially on the offensive side, the Dameon Pierce lovers of the world, which I'm a fan. I think he's solid. But, people are going off the rails on some of these players. So don't let the preseason hype train go crazy and make you guys make a crazy move, especially on the IDP side. Kraig, who do you want to talk about first? We'll give you first shots. Who's the player you want to bring up and you want to talk about first, and what do you like or dislike about what's going on with him?
We're going to go to a guy that isn't getting a lot of talk, but we're going to go to Seattle I think it's going to be a yuck year for a team that isn't going to be looking that great overall, but it's going to give some opportunities to some of those defensive guys, and certainly on the defensive line, sort of edge position. They've been looking for guys for years there, and I think they might have one here in Boye Mafi, that edge they had out of Minnesota, I think. He has looked really nice in the preseason. He's actually been getting decent playing time for them. So if any of you pay attention to snap counts, sort of like what we've talked about, just because someone's a starter doesn't mean they're getting snap counts in the NFL. It's you want to look at what they're getting for snaps and where they're playing those snaps each week. So he has actually played, for what we have here, week 1, 65% of the snaps, which is quite a bit for preseason. And I don't have the week 2. It's really harder to come by these right away after the week for preseason games. But week 1, he had 3 solos, 2 sacks, a tackle for a loss, and a QB hit. In week 2, he had 5 solos. So he's getting production. He was a guy that had been getting some hype as potentially being a late first round or something in the NFL draft, and didn't come out. But one of the things we talk about is being on the field and having that opportunity to get you production. We talked about it. It'll be brought up later in the realm of sort of Arnold Ebiketie with the Falcons not having a whole lot else. Same sort of situation there, where the defense is probably going to be on the field quite a bit, and he's going to get those opportunities, maybe not to get those sacks if they're playing from behind and the team they're going against is running the ball more, but certainly get you those tackles. He's an athletic guy, and he's shown well so far.
Austin, what do you think about him? What have you been seeing, or what do you where's your head at with him?
I'm definitely encouraged by the tackle numbers that we've seen so far in the preseason. I guess the only thing that I would say is context matters. When is Mafi on the field? How long is he staying in? And we'll talk about, you'll hear us talk about snap counts and things like that. And, is a higher percentage snap count or more snaps on the field, conducive to more playing time in the regular season. Not necessarily. It can be a little misleading in the preseason. Boye Mafi is a guy who's a raw talent. Reminds me a lot of Odafe Owe. Some guys know him as Jason Owe last year from Penn State, who was a very talented prospect from a physical standpoint, but what he lacked was the experience. And it's kind of the same way with Boye Mafi. A really exciting prospect in terms of his physical tools, but I'm concerned that he'll be a little bit limited in what he can do overall. I mean, Pete Carroll talked about it a little bit earlier in the offseason, basically saying, hey, our plan for him is we're going to stand him up and we're going to let him go because that's what he's good at. That's a little bit concerning to me in the sense that, yes, it's great that he's going to be an edge rusher. He's going to be able to get to the quarterback and do all those things. And that's exactly what I expected for him. But it also kind of confirms what some of my concerns were, is like, he's not going to be great in coverage. He's not going to be like an, 3-down pass rusher. He's probably going to be subbed in and out on packages, which is normal. Try to keep your guys fresh, especially a young guy like this, but definitely want to see him develop and try to get a bigger snap share as the season goes on. Obviously, we haven't seen the regular season yet, so it's to be seen. But my expectation is that he could potentially just be used in certain situations, and they're going to use him as a pass rusher. Could generate some sacks, tackles for losses, things like that, be disruptive, but he may not be one of those guys that you can rely on week to week as a solid fantasy contributor.
Yeah. In my mind, this team looks like a team that's primed to go target a quarterback. Now that we've heard the Baker news and some of these other players that are getting the starting nod, like we've seen what we've seen out of this the Seattle quarterback group, and I don't think they can survive the season with these guys. I mean, that's just whether it's injuries or ineptitude. I mean, they're just not in a good spot. So it wouldn't surprise me if that happens. If that doesn't happen and they do ride with these two for the season, this defense will be on the field a lot, and they're going to need to rotate guys. I think, and it's a great question Timothy brings up, but it brings us to an interesting point that we used to know what the preseason was. Week one, you didn't see them a lot of starters because they were still getting in. They get a week, they get basically a drive, which we saw last week. Week two, then you would see a little bit more like a quarter. Week three, you'd see a half because it's kind of the tune-up game for the season. Then week four, no starters play. You've started to see it transition to where guys don't want their starters getting hurt, so you just don't see him playing much. I mean, like, think about what's ahead of him on the Seattle depth chart. Uchenna Nwosu, the guy who's from the Chargers, who I think had some pretty significant injury history in his time in the league, but is a solid player when healthy. Then you've got, Barton and Jordan Brooks, and then Taylor, so you probably have your starters in that group somewhere. And then Mafi is getting a lot of work in the preseason because he's a rookie and they want to see what he can do and help him to get up to speed quickly. But I think the interesting part of this conversation is how does this look? And it's to Timothy's question here, and I want to kind of expand on a little bit. A snap count during the preseason doesn't really tell us much anymore. It doesn't tell us what it used to tell us, really. So is preseason snap count really more helping guys get ready for the season and see what they have in them, or is it something else completely? With Mafi, I like the talent. I think he's really intriguing, and the way that he's played throughout the preseason, I would have expected people to get a little bit more excited about him because he looks like probably one of their better pass rushers. I mean, think of what they put into this defensive line over the last few years, and he's looked better than some of the other pieces that they've had. Darrell Taylor and some of these other guys that they've went after. So, Kraig, I want to kind of kick it back to you. What is snap counts in the preseason? I mean, to Timothy's question, what is this? Does any of this mean anything? Like, what can we really deduce from what we've been seeing?
I think it depends on the team and the players that they have around them. If they have a bunch of veterans that don't want to play and there's a young draft pick and he's getting a lot of playing time, they're trying to get him experience. If he's probably a top 4 round draft pick anyway, you'd think they're relatively safe pretty much no matter what. They're just getting that experience in case they're needed to play, or if they're projected to be a starter, that way they're just getting that live game experience. If it's especially still that last week of the preseason and you're a late round pick or a free agent or an older veteran with not a lot of contract, they're probably trying to see, is this a guy that's going to make the team at that point? What sort of impression are they going to make? And then you got to look at where they're using him too. Mafi's had a good number of snaps on special teams. He had a touchdown saving play on one of them, so he's probably going to be used there during the season a bit. And, he's a guy that just needs experience in the NFL, and they don't have a whole lot, to your point, and sort of at that edge position that's shown him a lot in the NFL. So they want to say, hey, is he a guy that if we put out there in these situations, is he going to be able to produce for us? Can we rely on him in those? So far, it seems like it. So, this next week, it sounds like he might be out. He has a shoulder strain, so he's not a guy that's in danger of being cut, but they're probably going to have that playing time that, whatever 65% it was, split it more against these other guys, say, hey, you're probably closer to not making the team. What do we have? And, how are you going to make the team if you're going to?
Yeah, no, I would agree. Austin, do you have anything you want to add to that? Is there anything that you've been able to take away from preseason in terms of, how it's different from before, when you only got the 3 games?
I think you guys pretty much nailed it. The meaningful snaps are probably going to come in the first and then some into the second quarter at this stage of preseason. Most of the reps after that, they are just for experience. They are just, coaches evaluating the players and things like that. So I don't put as much stock into it. I don't put as much stock into a guy that's playing into the third, fourth quarter against third, fourth, and fifth string guys who may not even make the roster, and they're somehow generating, numbers. It's encouraging to see, as we go through the show, we'll talk about, stats and things like that. It's encouraging to see the stats and guys be productive, but do keep in mind, guys, just like we say, hey, don't get excited about, one guy making a big play. Also don't be too discouraged on guys who just aren't seeing enough playing time. Cause to me, that's almost like, well, hey, this might be a good sign. So it's kind of weird how preseason all works.
And I think that's a good segue into a player that I wanted to talk about, more so because nothing's happened with him. Linebacker Christian Harris from the Texans. He hasn't played mostly due to injury more than anything. He's recovering and hasn't got in because of that. But he's a guy throughout the offseason that as a linebacker, if anyone asked me somebody to target that's, maybe a little bit further down and not one of the bigger names, he was a guy that I liked. I know Bama linebackers really haven't come to the league and been super exciting over the last 5 to 10 years, but Harris is kind of cut from a different mold, and the guys in the league are seeing that. When I was reading an article that they were talking to Blake Cashman, who's I don't know if he's really a starter for them. He's kind of a next, kind of a journeyman veteran linebacker. Says that Harris has a second or third year player mentality to him. He's kind of a veteran type player already, even though he's not actually seen any meaningful snaps. And Camus Grugier-Hill and Christian Kirksey, I think, are their top 2, both veterans, both know the scheme, and both, I've painstakingly watched both of their games so far, and those guys look like they're top 2 linebackers. So I don't anticipate Harris really stepping in and taking an immediate role or immediate impact on this team when he is healthy, but still a guy that I like. But he's on the opposite end of the spectrum, so I want to make sure we brought him up. He's done literally nothing because he hasn't played in a game. So we were having this conversation actually on the Roto Heat Discord earlier, whether it was Channing Tindall or Christian Harris, one of the in the IDP chat. We were kind of chit-chatting about it, and I tagged Austin because I know that he's a Tindall guy and I'm a Harris guy. Although I like both players. It's not really one or the other. But Harris is a guy that's going to slide and kind of be able to be slid under the radar and hidden. So if you're in deeper leagues and people are maybe not looking at him and he hasn't been picked up, or you're in a league that you have room to stash him, I would stash him because right now there's nothing to show on him. But I still like the talent. I still like the player. He's somebody that I'm still actively trying to have on my deeper rosters, or even on those where you can only stash, because I have a couple leagues where you can only stash on your taxi squad first and second year players. Definitely a guy that I like, and I want to see what happens, because this Houston defense has room for young guys to really step up and make a name, because it's not great. There's a lot of holes in that defense. So I like Harris. I'm still intrigued by him, and I don't know if either of you have anything you want to add. There hasn't been much to say on him, but if you'd like to, feel free to add your comments on him. Kraig, I saw Austin shake his head, so Austin's got nothing.
I wouldn't touch him in redraft. Dynasty, he's a fine stash, and maybe you'll get some out of him later in the year if there's injuries, but for the most part, I'm not expecting anything out of him really this year at all. So
probably not.
He's ignorable.
I mean, the short and sweet of this too is that opposite of, kind of what I alluded to is like, well, guys who aren't getting, high snap counts in the preseason, things like that, that could be a good sign. In his case, not practicing, not playing, he's missing meaningful snaps, and that's not good. Now, do we think he's at risk of being cut, to Brad's point or to Craig's point earlier? No, he's at no risk. Like, they drafted the guy, spent good draft capital on him to bring him in. I think their expectation is to have him around. But these are meaningful snap counts, in the preseason and practices and all those things. And, for a young guy, he's got to get up to speed. He does have some veterans that are ahead of him. And so that's what makes it that much more important is, he actually does have some form of competition, albeit not elite competition, but competition nonetheless, competition that has experience. So it's definitely important for him to try to find his way back to the field.
All right, Austin. So roll into your next player. Who do you want to talk about?
Well, we kind of have the same situation here. And since we're on the DNP players, Christian Harris, who's missed a lot of time, we can go ahead and roll right into Devin Lloyd, another linebacker here from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Both preseason games did not practice. We saw him get back on the practice field this week, and he is running with the first team. So that is encouraging. He's doing individual drills and things like that. Will we see him in the preseason? Still uncertain. But again, just like Christian Harris, these are meaningful snaps that he's missing out on. And the benefactor of that is that you've got, obviously Foye is locked in, but, a guy we've talked about on the show previously and other rookie talks is Chad Muma. And Chad Muma has been the recipient of some really good snaps. And he's done well with those. So do I think that Devin Lloyd is the better player? Yes, absolutely. I do. I think that next year, Devin Lloyd is probably going to be leading the linebacker group. He's going to be a leader on the defense. He could develop into an elite fantasy asset for IDP. But right now, this is really concerning. And again, he's got to find his way back to the field. He's got to get out there and be productive.
Well, and when you look at this Jacksonville defense, I mean, who's going to keep him out of a starting role? Muma, at least at this point, has been slotted more on the outside than the inside. So then on the inside, as a backup on the inside to like Olakun. So it's either Muma or Shaq Quarterman are kind of those next two guys. And are either one of them talented enough to keep Devin Lloyd off the field? No, I don't think so. I mean, they spent a first on him. He's got the talent and the upside. I don't even think him missing all 3 games really keeps him out of the starting lineup week 1. Craig, what do you think about that?
Yeah, he probably plays week 1 regardless if he's healthy. How much does he play? Does he probably play less? Answer then yes, because he doesn't have as many reps and that experience with the first team or, just the starting defense at that point in the regular season. And, we see this every year, as of late in the NFL with these abbreviated practices and preseason, that there's going to be more mistakes in the defense in general. And we take into account that it's a rookie that really hasn't played in much preseason time. We're probably going to see more mistakes out of him. So can it affect someone? Yeah. And does it matter for him for IDP purposes? If he's on the field list? Yeah, it does matter. Now, long-term over the course of the season, maybe not as much, but when you're starting off the year, if you drafted him, if you're a team that needed linebacker help and you're thinking you're going to have a starter putting up points for you, probably not going to have as much luck with that as you would think. It's possible that he still comes out guns blazing and has a great year from start to finish. Yeah, but just statistically over the course of time, it makes it less likely the more practice that you're missing without getting those reps and experience with those guys you would normally be playing with.
Well, and to Timothy's point, I don't know that, and I've looked on like PFF and some of the places to see how often they've been sitting in what packages, but I don't know with this new coaching staff if we're going to really know how often they're going to be, with just 2 linebackers or 3 linebackers on the field to be able to answer this. I mean, the money they spent on Olakun, I mean, he's going to be on the field. He's kind of their number 1. And then if they're just in, nickel situations, you got to think Lloyd's the 2. If they have 3 linebackers on the field, I mean, then you're getting into, is it, do they have Josh Allen standing up? Do they have Trayvon Walker standing up? I don't know that we can truly answer the question, what happens after that, but Olakun is their number 1. I mean, they spent the money on him. So he's kind of their top guy, but the cool thing about this team is the way they're built. They've got, I think, probably 3 solid stand-up pass rushers. Chason, I think, could develop into that. So I put him in that category. I don't think he's truly there yet. But between Josh Allen could stand up and be an off-the-edge rusher if they don't want to have his hand in the dirt. And then you got Chason, and then Olakun could do that if need be as well. Trayvon Walker. So this team has an interesting group of linebackers on the outside to rush the passer. So, Kraig, who do you want to talk about next, bub?
I even forget who I put on this list. So let me go back to that quick. We'll go to a guy who got hurt, Jaquan Brisker for the Bears, who had just been having a great camp and then preseason. He was really showing out. A lot of people were expecting high things for him this whole season with the draft capital and then how he'd been doing. But he had, I think it was minor thumb surgery, and they're saying he may still be available for week 1. And your thumb, how much does that affect defensive back? Well, if they have a club on their arm, obviously, but if it's just in some sort of small brace or something to protect their thumb, probably not as much. And the Bears certainly are going to need help in the defense, as they're transitioning their defensive scheme, and they drafted him to be a starter. And if he's healthy, he's going to be out there starting. And he's one of the few guys that we're going to be talking about here that, if you're in a league where you start 2 or 3 defensive backs, he may end up being someone that you can start this season and have a decent amount of production with, because he is playing, I think when we ranked our safeties this year, he was a top 3 safety for us here, somewhere across the board, but cumulative top 3. And he's sort of shown that to be true thus far with what he's done in practice and the preseason game that he played. So I'm excited about him. But again, is it dampened a little bit with that injury? Yeah, if he's not playing to start the season, you're not going to be able to play him up there on your fantasy team either. And we'll see how long it lingers, but they don't sound too concerned about it, which is good.
Yeah, I think he's probably been at least through week 1 when we could see all of them on the field. I think he'd look the best of the rookie safeties. Mm-hmm. I'm still high on Petrie, and then Hamilton. It's kind of been a mixed bag here, at least so far at the beginning. But Brisker's looked really good. We all thought he was solid. Yes, you're right. If you look at the rankings over on rotoheat.com, we had him as our 3rd ranked safety. But there's still a ton of hope. And the great thing about safeties, it looks like, even if he does have a club, what we saw in the game from him, you can still pass deflect with a club. You can still, do most of the things that he would do. Obviously, that limits the interceptions because, unless you're Odell and, in one-hand interceptions, it's probably going to be a little harder.
Well, it makes it harder to tackle, too, if you're trying to wrap up without your hands.
Yeah, I can. And the tackles can get a little harder, too. But I'm still hopeful. I still think he's got a good season ahead of him. And I think I don't know that I was on this bandwagon before preseason, but through the first game, in my mind, it was like he might be probably the most productive fantasy safety of the group based on, how the teams were using and how much playtime the guy would get. He might turn out being the most productive of these rookie safeties. I'm not saying he's going to have the best career, but year 1, if you were looking for an immediate return and some sort of fantasy value, him and Petrie might be the two that, even though we have Kyle Hamilton and Lewis Seen rated higher, the next 2 might actually overproduce these first 2, depending on how things go. Austin, any thoughts on Brisker?
Yeah, we might have been too low on him. Like you guys said, his first year, he may be one of the biggest contributors of the group and the fastest contributors. I was really impressed by his range. Doesn't look like the game is too fast for him, especially at the safety position. That's a position that, these young guys, it takes a little bit of time for them to kind of get used to the game and then all the things that are going on with the NFL defenses and things like that. But he looks very comfortable, which is encouraging. And we got to see him get back on the field as well. I think, he looked really, really good. So I was very impressed by what I saw on the field.
I'm absolutely there with you. Okay, so we'll go to you next. We'll flip over to Austin. Austin, pick a player. Who do you want to talk about on your list of players?
Well, let's switch it up and let's talk about George Karloftus, the edge rusher that we got from Kansas City. Obviously, my team. Go Chiefs. He's looked really good this preseason. His sack celebrations have not looked so great, although his second one was much better. The first one was a little lackluster, but he's been really good, and I've been impressed by what he's done. He's shown that not only can he get to the quarterback, but he's going to be productive with, and, being able to generate tackles for loss, getting to the quarterback. And I think, looking here, his first weeks there we are. So he had 1 solo, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, 2 quarterback hits. I mean, he's basically checking every box. And then, week 2, he gets 1 solo, 1 assist, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss again, and 1 pass deflected. So you love to see that he's getting his arms, his hands in the air. He's in the right places. He's generating pressure. He's not, knocking the quarterbacks off of the spot, doing all the right things that you like to see. He looks like the real deal. He looks like he's going to be a good fit in Kansas City, which I think is really important for any rookie to be able to fit into the defense that they're going to. Sometimes talent, doesn't always earn you opportunities. Sometimes it's, about fit and your development. And George Karloftus looks like he's really coming along nicely. So I'm pretty excited about him.
Well, and with what's ahead of him, he has the best opportunity of these edge rushers to step in and take a prominent role. I mean, he's got a lot of old guys in front of him.
Yep.
Carlos Dunlop's not getting younger. Was it Frank Clark's on the other side, not getting younger? And you're seeing all the right things come out of Kansas City. I was looking at an article, I think it was earlier today, as I was doing show prep, but they were saying the hard work's paying off, and the coaches are seeing it. He's probably the hardest working defensive end on the field, and they needed that. I mean, this defensive line has not been great at producing consistent pass rush over the last few years. They've tried to look at it different ways, and Frank Clark's been solid for them, but they've needed some help. So I think Karl Loftus has the perfect opportunity, as long as he keeps grinding away, that he could really step in and be a force. Kraig, what do you think?
Yeah, I have him as my and this is Dynasty, of course, which is not just applicable to this year, but number 4 overall rookie on rotoheat.com. He was, kind of to your point, the kind of guy that Kansas City needed. I mean, he's a big dude, and he's a just super hard worker, which I always have a soft spot for those kind of guys, even when they're not the most talented. I had Hunter run for all over the place in fantasy before it was cool, because he was just, that sort of Wes Welker, smaller hard worker type of guy that just goes out there and gets it done. I think Chris Borland, when he played for San Francisco for a couple of years, that just not as heralded. Karl Loftus, of course, was viewed much higher than those guys, with where he was drafted. But to Austin's point, he's shown it that he's going to be able to do it. It's just how much time is he going to be given on that veteran team that has Super Bowl aspirations? Is he going to be out there a good bit? All signs right now are pointing to yes, and he's one of those rookies. Again, there aren't a lot of them each year, but he could have a nice return on your investment year 1 with what he's shown and the team that he's on.
Yeah, I love that he has the veteran presence around him too. Real quick, to Brad's point, I love that he does have those guys around him to just work with him. I've seen a lot of videos of after practices, him staying and working with those guys. So that's to me that's encouraging. He's out there, he's working on his craft, he's getting better. It's just very encouraging. So I'm excited for him.
Yep, I would absolutely agree. So I'll jump over to a guy I kind of already mentioned when I was talking Harris, and my next player we'll talk about is Jalen Petrie, the safety from Houston. He didn't play this last week, and it looks like it's most likely because he's probably already locked up starting position. All the news that I've been able to find out of Houston is it sounds like he's already, with the 1 preseason game, looks like he's probably, obviously you never want to say 100% certain, but a few articles I've seen out of Houston talked about him being all but a sure thing as their week 1 starter. They took him out of the 2nd round, and in week 1 looked solid. Looking at his stats, it looked like he got 4 solos and a tackle for loss. And with the way this team is, and the offense isn't as bad as people I think want to make it out to be, but I still expect this defense to have a fair amount of time on the field to where he should get you some really solid fantasy production if you need a deeper piece or a depth piece that you could use as a bye week guy. I'm not yet comfortable with any rookie saying there can be a weekly starter for you, but he's definitely one of those guys that I think, if you have him on your roster, you should feel pretty good about it. And I know I've got quite a few shares of him. When I was looking through most of my leagues, I have shares on him in quite a few spots. And I like what I saw out of him. You saw a lot of what you saw on the Baylor tape when you looked at him, the range, the speed, the power behind that, the way that he was hitting the tackles, his angles. I'm really pleased with what I saw at least on film in week 1. He didn't look overmatched, out of place. He didn't Derek Stingley anywhere. Like if you watched this last week, Derek Stingley looked mean, he was getting overmatched by wide receivers that are not going to be on the roster. So there was one play where, gosh, I can't think of that. He was the Chargers, this receiver that everybody in the Chargers area is talking about. This kind of like
Palmer.
deeper. No, not Palmer. It was hold on a second. I'll have to look it up now. But he got beat on, and it was just a cross. Like the guy, it was like 5 steps. Guy did one kind of in, and then or kind of out, and then beat him with the hips, went in, and Stingley was still looking in the backfield watching the quarterback, and I was like, "Ooh, I know rookie corners. It's going to take a minute, but man." It's crazy to me, and I'm with you, Timothy. I mean, Petrie really should have been in the conversation for a first round pick. Although, I mean, he went in second, so it's not far off. But he's definitely looking the part of what I was hoping for when I saw him, at least through week 1. So
he did play week 2, Brad. He just
did he play? He didn't do anything.
Nothing for stats, but he got 17 snaps.
Oh, he did get 17 snaps. You're right. Okay, so he was in week 2.
Yeah.
You're right. I didn't look at that part of it.
It's not the end of the world. But.
No.
And that goes back to one of the things that we talked about earlier. Is like, yeah, his snaps are low. You got 18 and 17, and he didn't do a whole lot in the second. But, I mean, what are they out there looking like? Why would they keep him on the field? What are they looking for that they haven't seen in practice? All the reports coming out of, Houston are that they really like Jalen Petrie. And he's shown so far that, he's probably going to be a starter, and he's probably going to be an immediate fantasy contributor. I mean, he's a really good player. He was excellent in college at Baylor.
I apologize. It was the Rams they were facing, and the receiver that people have been talking about is a kid named, I don't even see him on this list, but he had reception. So what in the world? Oh, here we go. Gosh, I'm not seeing it here on the list of their receivers. Oh, well, he got beat real quick. It was one of the first passes that he got beat on. What was that, Craig?
They just don't have a whole lot else at safety anyway. I mean, that's probably why he has so few snaps through, each of the first couple of weeks is, get him some playing time that we talked about. So he's on the field getting a little experience. But if I put a guy out there for the whole game to get hurt when you're going to be starting him week 1, and despite what they say, every team, is thinking, we want to go to the Super Bowl and win. There probably is a bit of realism, realizing they got an uphill battle, this year, and they don't need to put a young guy out there to get hurt. It's him and Eric Murray, and then a bunch of old veteran depth. So,
I mean, by midseason, you could probably see 3 or 4 of their rookies from this class starting on defense. That's where this team's at in reality. I expect Harris to be a starter at some point, probably on the weak side and maybe the strong side. I mean, he's not going to be the Mike, but he's probably going to be on the field for a significant amount of time. And even they like the defensive tackle, Thomas Booker or whatever his name is? Yeah. They like him from what I've seen. What was that?
Stingley too. Something that'd be 4.
Oh yeah, Stingley too. Yeah, for sure. So, all right, Craig, who do you want to talk about next, buddy?
We're going to go to a guy that's got a little bit of playing time each game and is still, I don't think, probably in line to start, but Nakobe Dean for the Eagles. He's got 4 solos and then a solo and 2 assists on 38 and 41% of the snaps. 24 and 30 snaps is what it equates to in a preseason game. So he's been out there. He's been showing all right. I don't think that they're going to just throw him into the fire as a starter right away. That remains to be seen, but I think Kazir White and TJ Edwards are going to be the starters there. Both of those players have been talked up quite a bit by the coaching staff and the other players. It's just doing fantastic and showing a lot this year. And it's a situation where with some of the red flags that Dean had, there's no reason for them just to throw him out there if they don't need to right away. He's a longer-term piece, and he's a great guy to be able to have sort of grow in a backup role and be a starter in a pinch if something happens. But I think, despite him showing well in the preseason, one of the reasons, again, you're seeing him play a little bit more is to get him that experience, and they're knowing, hey, we don't have to count on this guy as a starter right away. There's a lot of people out there that, got excited at the spot that he went to. I think it's a situation we just need to hold our horses a little bit. And, you might need to wait a year or two because I think both Edwards and White are free agents after this year. We're probably not going to bring both of them back, which, give Dean an opportunity. He's a 3rd-round pick. They're probably looking at him as a long-term starter with the talent that he has. So, again, this year, I don't think he's probably going to end up being a starter, but it is nice to see him out there playing and doing well after he fell in the draft.
Austin, any thoughts on him?
I'm good with that. everything you said, you nailed it. I mean, because your White's probably the number one linebacker to have there in Philly, and I think it buys Philly time as long as they've got White and Edwards to figure out, if they want to keep one of those guys around, and then next year is probably when you see Nakobe Dean step in and take on a full-time role. So.
Yeah, just checking Spot Track. It does look like they're both free agents after the year. So, yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I think he's probably the most talented linebacker they've drafted last 5 years easily.
It's the highest drafted linebacker since Marcus Smith in 2014.
Yeah, and I think he's the most talented of the linebackers they've drafted. I mean, this is a team that's really had a hard time drafting good linebackers. I mean, they don't. I mean, that's just because they don't draft them.
Yeah, I mean, the third round pick is the highest they've had, and the next closest recent was Davion Taylor, who's still on the team, but he's had injury issues. So,
yep. All right, so because it's already 10:15, I want to make sure we jump to.
We did start late too, so
we did start a little late, but I want to make sure we get to a couple of these other guys. I talked Petrie, you talked Nakobe Dean. All right, so Austin, why don't you talk about one of your next guys? Looks like you got a couple linebackers left.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and I'm tempted to go with the obvious one, but I'm going to go with the less obvious one. I'm going to go with Quay Walker here. Quay Walker is a guy that has the Packers really excited. I'm hearing that he's the kind of player that can change the way this defense plays. He's going to be a guy who can line up anywhere. And he has Devonta Campbell to learn from, which is just incredible. But it's good to see him getting back on the field as well. I believe, he was dealing with a little bit of an injury early on in camp. He was able to get on the field. In week 1, he got 12 snaps. And then week 2, he was able to get a tackle, solo tackle and 1 assist. So not a lot happening for him, but also just another guy, kind of like we talked about with Petrie, who, they're not giving him a ton of snaps because, like, what more do they really need to see from him? And it's not a lot. And from what I've heard and seen, it appears that he's in line to have some kind of role alongside Devonta Campbell. They have ran in some nickel sets, and he's been a stand-up linebacker that they've moved up to the edge, and he's been able to generate some pressure and do some things like that. So I am pretty encouraged by what I've seen by Quay Walker. I think that he's going to be that second linebacker on the field for Green Bay, and I think he's really going to surprise some people.
They don't have a lot, though, right? Like, when you look at the interior linebackers, this team tends to be – their base package tends to be like a 3-4. They do, a lot of nickel and dime stuff, but I mean, they almost have to make him a starter if he's healthy and good to go, because Chris Barnes and Ty Summers, trying to rotate those guys in with Campbell. I mean, yes, the talent's there for sure. I mean, he's definitely a guy I've targeted as well, but I mean, he kind of has to be in the lineup, and they took him where they took him. You expect it too, but Kraig, what are you hearing up there? Anything special with Quay Walker that you're excited about?
No, I guess my thing, other than what Austin had mentioned, was just really people that are really high on Devonta Campbell again this year after what he did last year. Probably need to temper your expectations a little bit, just because the Packers, for the course of how many seasons we talked about on a prior show, they just don't use 2 linebackers because they haven't had 2 of those inside linebackers to use. And if that's going to change the game with having a guy like Quay Walker have the talent out there more, that is going to eat into a little bit of Campbell's production. Mm-hmm. How much? I'm saying he's not going to be a linebacker 1 this year, have that potential. No, we saw it last year. He was like a top 3 linebacker in a lot of systems, scoring systems, that is. He's probably not going to get that high, but he could still be a back-end linebacker 1. But you're just going to have to see how it plays out, and then you not be expecting that huge production from last year, because this defense as a whole, I think, has gotten better. And then you're adding talent like Quay Walker to the linebacker group, where the team has now come out, and we said it a month ago or so, that they're planning on using 2 linebackers more, and they're drawing stuff up, and it's going to change how they did it. And it's great for IDP purposes in terms of having another linebacker out there to get points for you. And, if you're drafting Quay Walker, you'll love to hear it. But on the other end of it, the production comes away from someone else too.
Absolutely. All right. So in theory, I want to talk about Aiden Hutchinson, but there really isn't much to say, right? Like, he has been dominant. He's looked really good. Team loves him. They need to play him. I mean, he's their best edge rusher. I want to talk about a different Lion.
He's
And we're going to
dominant
kick
in those 11 snaps he's played in the preseason.
Best singer.
Have you watched? So if you watched,
I have not watched Hard Knocks. I don't watch any of it.
Well, I know you don't
We
know.
talked about that.
Do not watch anybody who watches Hard Knocks and tries to take anything away from it to figure out what to do with players is crazy. That show is made to have dramatic storylines that get you excited. Don't get me wrong. He has the voice of an angel when it comes to doing his best impersonation of a Michael Jackson song or whatever, but I'm just not like he looked good preseason game 1. He's looked fine in camp against when they've done, the joint practices against Colts. I watched, a bunch of that footage and then watched McAfee's show when they were at Colts camp. I'm trying to glean as much as I can, but there's not a whole lot to say about a kid who was number 2 overall. They're going to have him on the field as much as they can because they need him. You don't pick a number 2 for nothing. I mean, this team needed as much help as they get. There's another line that I want to kick it back over to Kraig to talk about that was on his list to talk about, which I think we can glean more out of, and you can see more of how the team feels about him if you watched Hard Knocks. But Kraig, talk about what you think about Malcolm Rodriguez, the linebacker who, I mean, if you listen to Coach Shep, has a chance to be a starter week 1 because all the rest of the guys aren't doing their job.
Well, they've had a sad state of linebacking affairs for a while in Detroit now, where they just can't hit on linebackers. And Rodriguez does have a uphill battle. He was a 6th round pick this year. He had a really nice NFL career. College
career. He might have a good NFL career. Who knows?
In a different, multiverse world. He's already played in the NFL. But, he had a standout career at Oklahoma State. Physically, for his size, he is a smaller guy, 5'11", 230. He can hit. He's a smart player. He has a high effort. He has some other sort of physical limitations that might hinder him a bit in the NFL long term, but we've seen other players overcome those and have a great career. So he is certainly a Dan Campbell type player, so that he's got that going for him. And to your point, there just hasn't been much in that linebacking core. The problem is that we saw last year, they sort of use the linebackers to their strengths and they rotate people through. And I think you're probably going to continue to see that again because they don't have just one complete linebacker. And as much as fun as it is to see Rodriguez on these highlights, whether it's just shots from Hard Knocks or in the games, because he has been getting playing time in the games, I think you need to temper your expectations on him if you're drafting him in redraft, or if you got a late dynasty draft. Don't be taking him in the first round of an IDP draft, because I just don't think you're going to get that return on your investment this year if that's what you're looking for. If you think he's the next guy for the Lions for the next 10 years as a starter, midway through this year and on, go ahead and, shoot your shot and maybe end up being right. But this year, I just don't see him returning, linebacker 1, 2, probably not even 3, although if he's out there sort of at that, 70% clip that we saw the highest linebacker last year for the Lions, maybe he does if he's out there and able to get those tackles, because someone's going to. But if they end up rotating like they have in years past, I just don't see him returning on as much of a fun story as it is. If he makes the team and starts, he's already got his story. Now it's what are you going to do with your career?
All right, so we'll go to the head of the Rodrigo fan club. Austin, what's your take on what could be your favorite football player ever?
Nothing. So keep in mind, guys, I'm from Oklahoma, so I've watched him through Oklahoma State. A little bit of bias, but not too much. He bench pressed more than any linebacker, I believe, in the combine. He's a guy with a high motor. You said it earlier, Kraig, you kind of have a soft spot for those work hard guys, and that's exactly what Rodrigo is. That's exactly why he's in the position that he's in, because he came in and the Lions have an ugly linebacker room, and he came in and he's putting the work in and he's doing kind of all the right things, and it's probably going to end up paying off for him. To your point, though, I would agree. Do I expect linebacker 1 numbers, linebacker 2 numbers? That's probably way beyond anything I would expect for him in his first season, even if he is a starter. The opportunities will be there if he's the starter. That's great. He does have some physical limitations. You talked about those a little bit. What the concerns that those create for me is, what kind of fantasy production and what kind of production will we get from an IDP standpoint from Malcolm Rodriguez? Is he going to be a guy that they're going to send in blitz packages and try to get him, let him get after the quarterback? Is he going to be a guy that's going to be a high tackle guy? Is he going to be a guy that they're going to be able to play in coverage? Those are the kinds of things that we really just don't know yet. for his career at Oklahoma State, he was a good tackler, excellent leader, always in the right positions, kind of just always did the right things. Physically, he was strong despite being small in stature. And so he was able to use that to his advantage to generate the numbers that he did in college. Will he do that in the NFL? I'm not sure. This is a totally different game. To my point, we talked a little bit off, the air here, if you will, and in the IDP chat. And I think it might have even been privately, but my point was just that no one spent the draft capital on Malcolm Rodriguez to have expect linebacker 1 or even linebacker 2 production. To Jaws's point, I think he said down here in the chat that he said he would have had him on his team if he didn't trade his 6th round pick away. That's about where he was going, 5th, 6th round in rookie drafts, for IDP. And, the draft capital that you're spending on that guy, he was the safest pick. He was the safest pick. He walks into a great situation. The linebacker room's in shambles. We know what the kid did in college, how good of a leader he is. If he got the opportunity, that pick was going to pay off. So in my opinion, great pick if you got Malcolm Rodriguez already in some of your leagues. If you don't have him in your leagues, he's probably on waivers. Go grab him. Because what's the worst that can happen? You spent the minimum amount that you could probably spend on the kid. And if he has any return at all, to me, that's a win. So that's where I'm kind of at with him. To your point, though, I would say everybody, hold your horses, don't get ahead of yourself on this deal and think that he's going to be producing like linebacker 1 elite numbers. That's not going to be the case. There's still a lot of wait and see with his game and what's going to happen with him. But at cost, he's one of the safest linebackers you could have drafted this year at cost. And I think we'll see that once the season gets started.
Yeah, the thing I want to see from him, because everybody's super excited about him. And I watch Hard Knocks. I watch all the game film. I watch as much as I can on the team. I mean, he's looked the best of our linebackers. That really probably goes more to show what our linebackers are at this point. But the struggle I have with a guy like him is that, and I will tell you, once the office area gets finished, you will see my Stephen Tulloch autograph. I don't care about your size. If you're a good football player, I'm all about it. And I was a huge Stephen Tulloch fan when he was in Tennessee, and then when he came to Detroit with Schwartz. I mean, I loved Stephen Tulloch. So a smaller linebacker does not bother me. His thing is, I'll be interested to see if his athletic profile, if it can really hold up over a full season against good teams. Week 1, it was against Atlanta. That is not a good offense. They have holes all over the place. They've got some pieces, but it's not a complete package. And then what we saw this last week was not against a ton of starters. It's not they're going against vanilla offenses, just kind of running things. It's not a great example. So it's really, truly hard to tell. What I can tell you is that he's picking up what Detroit's giving him, and he's showing them that he can lead at the linebacker position, which could get him a ton of playing time, because other than Alex Anzalone, and even last year, Anzalone did not look good. It wasn't like he showed up and was really going off. I mean, he just looked the least out of place. So it's the least worst of. So don't get me wrong. I think he could find his way into a significant amount of playing time because they really want Barnes to be the guy, but Barnes, I think, still needs another year of, I thought of him when he came from Purdue last year. I was like, in my mind, he's probably like a cornerback. It's going to take him 3 years to really get things under his belt. Because think how many linebackers Purdue's produced ever. It's not been a huge amount in the last 15, 20 years. So the guy's working a specific scheme that isn't necessarily translating well to the NFL. So, the 2 linebackers they've drafted 4th round, 6th round. So I got to think this team starts investing capital, earlier capital, day 2, maybe even 1st round capital, depending on what next year's class looks like. Mm-hmm. So, Rodriguez is fun, a great story. If you get something out of him, great. If you get him for free, even better. But people are going to start putting actual money on getting him off waiver wires, and I'm just not spending much because I don't really, they rotate so much because they're not great. So.
Yeah, that's the big concern for me too. Like you said, this year it could work out really well for Rodrigo. My concern is, like you said, if they bring in an elite talent next year, like a Quay Walker, like a somebody, a Channing Tindall, that's physically as gifted and can get the job done. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that his game would hold up against that. Would they keep him on the roster? Yeah, of course they're probably going to keep him on the roster if he's playing well. But I don't think that he has the athletic profile to hold up against a guy that's just physically more gifted. Like, you can be a good football player, but if you couple a good football player with the elite physical tools, like some of these guys do have, the Devin Lloyds, the, guys like that, Roquan Smith, I mean, he doesn't stand a chance. Let's just be honest. So that's kind of where I'm at.
No, I'm with you. All right. So I want to get to Jaws' question. Then I want to talk about the Falcons linebackers, because I think this is one that this could help people in fantasy if one of these guys really gives you anything in terms of value. So we'll lump them together, and I'll give it to Kraig first. So Anderson and Ebiketie, one's edge, one's linebacker. What's your takeaway from what you've seen so far in these guys, and has it changed how you have them, in your rankings, or just kind of your overall feeling about them?
I mean, of the two, Ebiketie's probably going to get more of a chance this year just because of the dearth of talent that they have at the edge position, and with where he was taken. Anderson didn't play in the first game, and it sounds like he is not looking good in the second game here, that is going on right now. And I think that was kind of to be expected. We talked about he has all the talent in the world in terms of just physical tools, but the mental part of the game, playing linebacker, he doesn't have a ton of experience doing that, and he's going to have to figure that part of it out. Are they just going to throw him into the fire right away? Probably not, because again, it's a professional football team that's trying to win games, and they do have other options there. Michael Walker's a guy that's been around a while that I like. Rashaan Evans, he's a pro that's been around for a while, that they have more of a two-down thumper type of player. They still have Dion Jones there. Now, I know he was recovering from injury. I don't know where he's at exactly with that, but if he's healthy, he's a starter there. And when you're looking at it in terms of, I forget the guy's name, but I have it here. Nathan Landman. I mean, he led all of the defensive players for the Falcons last week in snaps, just to see what they have with the guy who was a later pick trying to earn his spot on the team. So he's a guy to keep an eye on, but it's just sort of like the Lions. It's to a lesser degree because there is more overall talent, I think, when you look at all the linebackers that the Falcons have. But it's still just a mess right now in terms of who's going to be on the field doing what if Dion Jones isn't healthy. If you have him and they don't trade him or anything like that, which is still a possibility, but with him being injured, it's harder to do that. If he's on the field, you're probably starting him, because Dion Jones still statistically is going to get you what you want when you're looking at IDP leagues. Now, he's not been great as far as like PFF numbers or anything like that, but when you got a bad team around you, by and large, that sort of follows that your stats aren't going to be great as far as how you grade out. But we don't really care about that unless you're in one of those all 22 pro leagues or whatever. PFF grades matter for that, but for the 99.9% of us that aren't in those, if he's getting you tackles and he's on the field like Jones is, he's the guy that you're going to want. And then potentially, if Walker's getting the other 80% snap share, or we see Rashaan Evans getting it, there's going to be value in that guy. It's just, who are these going to be? The team doesn't know right now, so how are we going to know?
Right. So we keep bringing up Dion Jones, and that brings us right to Jaws' question, which I'll give to you, Austin. Gets cut, moved soon. He gave a sixth for him. Thought he'd likely be moved by now. So, what's your take on Dion Jones? And is a sixth rounder too much, or would you be willing to give a late draft pick for a guy like him?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for me, no question, just because like we've seen him, he's a talented player. If he can find his way back on the field, obviously he's on the PUP list right now. I don't know what Atlanta's going to do with him. I mean, I guess it would just depend on what they could get for him. I wouldn't expect it would be much, to be honest. And that's kind of the unfortunate part, is like, do you give up the one good asset that you have for what? Like, what are you going to do with what you get back in return? Probably not a whole lot. It could be a matter of, just not having the distraction. Dion Jones hasn't been very happy in Atlanta. They're going to be paying him a lot more money. So maybe they move him and just, part ways and use the whatever draft capital or whatever asset they can get to try to build, something with, or save some cap and invest it somewhere else. That's a possibility. But as far as if he gets moved or cut, I definitely don't see him getting cut. As far as if he gets traded, again, regardless of what Atlanta wants to do, you have to find a trade partner, and it gets kind of weird when you start getting into all that. So that's really too hard to predict. for now, he's an Atlanta Falcon. My expectation is that he's going to remain an Atlanta Falcon. And we'll see what happens after this season.
Well, and trying to make trades this late into preseason it can be a bit difficult with guys that are like at the level of Dion Jones. Bigger name, comes with a bigger contract. You see a lot of the little things moving, guys that are back into the roster type guys. But I just don't. It's hard for me, and I looked. I was looking when Jaws asked the question. I don't find any conversations, any articles that say they are hearing anything. It's not like there's rumors. It's just guys going, oh, well, he could get traded just because this team is rebuilding. Well, the team may not think they're rebuilding. They went and got a veteran quarterback, hoping that maybe they can do something because the NFC South is not the strongest division. They're kind of like the NFC North. You have a true number one team, and you have some other teams that are trying, and they're at different varying levels of trying to compete for the division. So I don't know. Dion Jones has, looking at Spot Track, he's got this year, and then he's on the hook for, he's probably going to be with them next year too, unless they get a trade partner that's willing to eat some money. I mean, he's still got almost $6 million in dead cap next year. So
he's got 24 this year, which is
24 this year, and then 5.3 next year. Then he's an unrestricted free agent. So unless a team wants to get involved financially to take on some of that money, I can't imagine he gets moved, anytime soon. But anything's possible.
The Falcons, I think they're paying Matt Ryan more this year than anyone else on the team, and he might have the largest amount of money being paid by one team not to be on a team like ever. So
that is pretty hilarious.
Nothing new to the Falcons.
What's crazy is last year I said I was pretty public about saying that I thought there was no way the Falcons were going to move that Julio Jones contract with all the dead cap and everything that they had. And somehow they found a way with the Titans. So to think that it's just impossible is, I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to go there, but
on the NFL,
24 million in dead cap it's a big deal. And especially, we're talking about Julio Jones versus Dion Jones.
They're paying $40.5 million in dead cap for Matt Ryan to play for the Colts. So that in half, and you got Dion Jones.
Man, that would be crazy if they moved Dion Jones on top of it. They would have $65 million in dead cap.
But they're done after 1 year. I mean, that's the goal behind it, is they don't have to worry about any of it next year. So
$6 million next year's nothing. I mean, that's a discount for the Falcons at this point.
They'll take what they can get. Look at all this money we're getting back. So it's wild to think about, all that dead cap. But I've come to learn that the NFL can do whatever it wants. I mean, teams figure out ways around the salary cap all the time. It's wild to think about. I mean, anytime you're like, well, I don't really know, and then they do whatever they figure out ways, and and people get paid tons of money to figure out loopholes and how to structure salaries so that they can make these things happen. So it isn't just in draft day where they have to ask the lady if they can fit another couple million in the books for a second first round pick. Like, it isn't just in the movies, it happens in real life. So I do want to get one more question in because our boy Anthony jumped in. It's good to see you, brother. So with the surprise retirement of Carrie Willis, this is left the starting spot available at the exact position of Nick Cross. Do you guys think he produces at the NFL level? To go back to something, and I think it was it Timothy? Earlier in the chat, somebody said that
asked about Cross.
Timothy said, and it's good to see Timothy. We were seeing him on Thursday nights. It's good to see you, man. You saying Nick Cross has looked impressive, and I would agree. I think this team is wide open. I mean, across from Julian Blackmon, it could have been any number of players, and Nick Cross has looked the part. Craig, what do you think about him?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely going to start. And if you're talking about fantasy relevance, we've seen Carrie Willis have that before, and it'll be interesting to see how that defense backfield just comes together, because they have just a lot of new pieces back there in general. But as far as, could they go with the old veteran Rodney Mcleod? Yeah, but, you sort of know what you have with him. He's been sort of more of a better career backup. And this is a team that has not only division winning aspirations, but, getting to that Super Bowl from the AFC with what they've put in there for that offense. And, defense, it's a little bit more iffy. If if Shaquille Leonard is out, You got Bobby Okereke, who's probably going to be starting for him, and a bunch of other unknowns at linebacker. We've seen that does create more opportunities for safeties to get tackles and to come up and crosses, and to the point, showing well in preseason so far. So I like what I've seen out of him. He'll probably get that opportunity. Just, how quickly is he going to acclimate and then show up on the field for our IDP purposes?
Our friends at Fansided, man, could be an elite defender for the Colts as a rookie. Austin, is that your take? Do you feel like he could be an elite defender this year?
I feel like we should have had him on our list, is what I feel like now. He gives me the Cameron Curl vibes, kind of the guy that just flew under the radar. No one really talked about, wasn't the most highly regarded safety in his class, comes on, gets an opportunity with an injury and then shows out, plays extremely well. He's athletic. He does a lot of things really well. He should be able to generate tackles. I definitely think that he could be one of those guys that we should have spent more time talking about this offseason. And I definitely think he could be a year one contributor. Just the cards fell right for him. And so I think that could work in his favor.
Well, and this was a bit of an under the radar guy, right? He's from Maryland, but he wasn't people weren't super stoked about him and you weren't hearing a ton about him. And then he gets drafted as a 3rd round pick. So it was kind of hard to tell. And then, with obviously, like Anthony brought up, Carrie Willis ahead of him, people weren't really looking at him because we weren't expecting him to be on the field anytime soon. But now that he's on the field, he's looking every bit the part. And you almost feel like, wow, well, that's, it's great that he's getting an opportunity because it looks like he's ready to roll. Rookies, though, you still have to be careful. There's going to be points throughout the season where they still make those rookie mistakes. They still, based on what they thought they knew, and they were wrong. And, mistakes happen. But this kid looks every bit of the part of a safety that could be very productive in year one and be a nice depth piece for you. Again, I haven't seen a rookie yet on the field where I'm confident saying this guy's probably a week-to-week starter for you. Most of these guys so far give me the vibe that they're probably bye-week fill-in, and maybe you can spot start them, and depending on matchups, maybe things look a little better for some of these guys. But Cross looks good. I mean, if you can get him, I definitely would get him. And if you can stash him, stash him. If you can trade for him, trade for him. As long as you don't have to pay much. I mean, that's going to be the problem is preseason hype chart gets guys going up in price every time, and I tend to be off at that. Kraig, anything you want to finish off with before we roll out?
Yeah, I mean, just the thing about safeties, the past few years, you haven't seen a whole lot of safeties have week-to-week value as far as being a rookie. The last one, it doesn't mean I'm right because my memory is not what it used to be. I got too much Paw Patrol and Pokemon stuff stuck in my head these days. But Antoine Winfield Jr. is the last one that I can think of that as a rookie he actually had, DB2 value as a rookie that you could start and roll and be happy with. Some other guys, would have had that opportunity, probably McKinney or Delpit, and they got hurt. Last year, Chin, yeah, I guess there's another one. And he's sort of a special case with how he was used because they still have that situation, just ugly linebackers too, outside of Shaq Thompson there, and he's used more in that role. But you can find value in guys like that too. We briefly touched on him, but it's another situation. Kyle Hamilton to monitor. Is he necessarily going to be a starter? He might. Chuck Clark, a lot of his value was knowing that system that Martindale had there, which was a complicated system, and he's gone now. Hamilton can find other ways on the field too. That linebacking core isn't great. Patrick Queen had one good year, and he had a whole bunch of problems last year. They don't have a whole lot next to him. Hamilton's got the size that he can come up and play like that, and we've seen in the preseason, if you watched him, he's playing all over the field, sort of in that similar role. So when you're looking at these guys and you see that safety label, don't necessarily think he's a guy that's just going to be back in coverage all the time. Talk about a lot, but NFL is changing on how these players get used, especially that safety linebacker hybrid position is becoming a lot more popular. And a guy that isn't a starter in name can still have value if he's getting those snap counts and getting those opportunities to get you those tackles.
Yep, for sure.
Yep. And do you think the absence of Shaquille Leonard will play into Nick Cross's hand at all? Do you think that's a big deal, something to monitor?
Yeah.
I mean,
how can it not? If Leonard's not playing, I mean, look at his tackle numbers the past few years. I mean, someone's going to be getting those tackles, and you have again Okereke, and then EJ Speed. I forget the other guy's name. There was another big one.
Zaire Franklin. I mean, you got a few.
Yeah. But there's a whole bunch of just question marks. Guys that haven't had that playing time, but certainly not to that level and amount that Leonard had. Someone's going to be getting those. Who's it going to be? last line of defense is a safety. So
Absolutely. So, all right, we got one more question, then we're rolling out. We got Matthew Biddle. Well, welcome, sir. I don't know that I've seen your name in the chat. It's good to see you, my friend. Would you trade Mooney and Kenneth for CEH? So,
Assume that's Gainwell.
yeah. Oh, yeah. This is probably
it could
offensive
be
related.
Walker. It could be Murray. It's
either way.
The short answer for me is
right?
no. I'm not
Yeah.
trading Mooney for CEH straight up.
Yeah,
No,
Mooney's the
I
best
don't want-
piece of that. So I would hold on to Mooney.
I don't want Clyde for anything, and I'm a Chiefs fan. I don't
Oh,
want Clyde.
He did
I
say
don't
Kenneth
care.
Walker.
Yeah.
Okay,
no
Kenneth
way I'm
Walker,
trading
no
those
way.
two.
Yeah.
So
CEH, I'm telling you guys, no, a million times. This is my Roto Heat Rick. This is my, I'm going to reference him. This is my Ronald Jones.
oh no.
CEH
And Ronald Jones is even on that team too.
to me is Ronald Jones for Rick.
So
Just
we've
no.
found what Patrick Mahomes' weakness is. It's picking running backs to play on his team.
Oh, man.
He's not a running back scout, is what I just heard.
Oh man, Kareem Hunt really just
You can have him back. He
that
wants
one.
out.
That one hurts. 'Cause
So then,
that
so
was the
you're
guy.
wearing that hat. Who is RB1 in Kansas City, right? Is it
Oh
Pacheco?
My gosh. I'm intrigued by the work that he's getting, but I'm a little bit discouraged by his vision. I've seen it's been well documented and talked about, and you guys have probably seen the same things I have, where he's just not hitting the holes right. Patrick Mahomes was a little frustrated with him in the last game. He's more explosive. So the problem I have with CEH is they're going to continue to use him this year. The problem that I have with him is his ineffectiveness in the red zone is so obvious and painful that it's just frustrating. Like, I can't deal with it. They're going to have to find somebody to step up and be better in the red zone, and who that's going to be. I kind of thought it might be Ronald Jones, but Ronald Jones looked like he's not even going to have a shot. So he's out. So I'm not sure. I mean,
Jerick McKinnon.
Yeah, Jerick McKinnon's probably going to be the guy that's going to get most of the passing down work. But
Can he just go
Pacheco,
away?
you know what? They might get creative, because this is kind of what Kansas City's been doing a lot. Is I'm going to be curious to see how many snaps out of the backfield that a guy like Sky Moore is going to get. And I don't know if you guys have seen that in the practices and things like that. I know it sounds crazy, but they've lined Sky
it's
Moore
the Debo
up.
role, right?
Yeah, and they might kind of go that direction, because that's exactly what Kansas City does. Triple option with the tight end. They're all these different crazy things, having Tyreek line up in the backfield. They like to do that.
It wouldn't surprise
Yeah.
me.
Guy be
Josh's
in the
point.
air,
They go
not
get
on
somebody
the
else.
I would like Kenyon Drake. I would like some kind of veteran. I'm telling you guys, Clyde is not the answer. Just 1,000 times no.
So there you go. There's that. And Matthew, you need some help with trades and those conversations you're having, hit rotoheat.com. It has a link to our Discord. You can get in there. It's free, and we just chop it up. People are posting their trade questions and conversations in there all the time. So if you're not with us on a live stream and you need some help during the day or at different times of the day, chats are always going off. We got lots of people in there having good conversations. You can hit us up. You see our Twitter handles next to our names here on the screen. With that being said, I do thank you guys. I know we're getting to the end. We've only got another show. What do we got? One show left? Two shows?
One. No.
I think we got
Although
two shows
we
left.
may have. No, we got one.
We got one left. So next week's it for the season, because then Monday Night Football, and you would rather watch that than watch us. So we're going to be back with, we're going to be doing IDP waivers again this year. So, be on the lookout of that. We'll drop those videos on YouTube and then articles on the rotoheat.com. But the Discord is the best place, man. You can jump in there and have a conversation. We got chats for everything from fantasy football to movies, to sports cards, to whatever you need to talk about. We've got a chat for it. So we thank you guys for hanging out with us as always. And thank you guys for hanging out with us, even with my little bit lateness to the show. I do appreciate everybody, and I appreciate the gentleman holding it down while I got things in order here. And we thank you guys. Don't forget, tomorrow night, Tuesday night, we've got our Dynasty show back. And then as we get into the season, we got a lot of stuff going on. Our Discord channel, we're going to be doing live stages in there, so you guys can jump on and chat with us live on different nights of the week. And then we've got live shows Tuesday night, Wednesday night. We got a lot of stuff going on in season, so make sure you stick it here with us. We got Sunday morning, which will be back again with Rick and Bryce and guests, because they always have somebody on. So we got you covered in season. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification icon, do all the things you guys do. Share it with a friend, share it with everybody. We love you guys. We'll see you next week.